Imagine standing at the edge of a bustling market in ancient Chang'an, where the air hums with the scent of silk and spices, and caravans laden with treasures stretch toward the horizon. The Silk Road, a network of ancient trade routes spanning thousands of miles, connected east and west for centuries, weaving a tapestry of commerce, culture, and mystery. From China's imperial courts to Rome's marble forums, it carried not just goods like jade and gold, but ideas, religions, and secrets that shaped civilizations. Born from the ambitions of traders and explorers like Zhang Qian, this road was a lifeline of the ancient world, yet fraught with dangers, bandits, deserts, and plagues that tested the resolve of those who dared to travel its paths. What secrets did the Silk Road conceal in its oases and caravans? How did it transform empires and spark cultural revolutions? And what mysteries remain buried in its sands? Tonight, we embark on a journey through the entire history of the Silk Road, from its origins in ancient China to its decline in modern rediscovery. As the stars gleam over Samarkand's domes, prepare to be drawn into a saga of trade, adventure, and enigma that will leave you questioning the hidden forces that connected our world. The caravan is moving. Let the tale unfold. The origins of the Silk Road. The origins of the Silk Road trace back to the misty dawn of ancient China, a land where emperors ruled with the mandate of heaven, and the air was filled with the subtle fragrance of mulberry leaves rustling in the breeze. It was here, in the fertile valleys of the Yellow River, that a simple yet revolutionary discovery would set in motion a network of trade routes that would connect the East to the West, weaving a tapestry of cultures, ideas, and mysteries that endure to this day. The story begins around 2000 BCE, during the Xia dynasty, though some scholars argue it was even earlier, when Chinese farmers first learned to cultivate silkworms, those tiny creatures that spin threads of pure magic from their cocoons. The secret of silk production was guarded like a state treasure, a process so intricate and valuable that revealing it was punishable by death. The silkworms, feeding on mulberry leaves, produced a fine, lustrous thread that could be woven into fabric lighter than air, yet stronger than iron. This silk became the envy of the world, a material that shimmered like water under the sun and draped the bodies of emperors and nobles with an ethereal grace. But how did this delicate thread become the catalyst for one of history's greatest trade networks? The answer lies in the human desire for the exotic, the rare, and the beautiful, a desire that would drive merchants to brave deserts, mountains, and bandits in pursuit of fortune. As China's Han dynasty rose to power in 206 BCE, Emperor Wu sought to expand his empire's influence and secure alliances against the nomadic Xiongnu tribes that threatened the northern borders. In 138 BCE, he sent a brave explorer named Zhang Qian on a daring mission westward through the treacherous Gobi Desert to find allies among the Yuezhi people. Zhang Qian's journey was fraught with peril. He was captured by the Xiongnu and held captive for 10 years, but he escaped and continued his quest, reaching the Fergana Valley in Central Asia. There, he discovered magnificent horses, stronger and faster than any in China, which would become known as heavenly horses. But more importantly, he learned of distant lands rich in goods that China craved: grapes, alfalfa, and pomegranates from Persia, glass from Rome, and spices from India. Jiang Qian returned to China in 125 BCE, his tales igniting the emperor's imagination. The Han court realized the potential for trade, and soon caravans began to traverse the routes that would become known as the Silk Road. But why silk? This luxurious fabric, soft as a whisper and dyed in vibrant colors, was China's most prized export. In exchange, they received gold, silver, ivory, and exotic animals. The road was not a single path, but a network of trails crossing deserts, mountains, and oases where merchants traded not just goods, but ideas, religions, and technologies. The Silk Road's formation was driven by the demand for Chinese silk in the West, where it became a symbol of status and wealth. Roman emperors draped themselves in silk robes, while in India it was woven into saris for royalty. But the trade was perilous. Caravans faced sandstorms in the Taklamakan Desert, bandits in the Pamir Mountains, and treacherous river crossings. Oases like Dunhuang and Kashgar became bustling hubs where camel drivers rested, merchants haggled, and spies lurked. These stops were melting pots where Buddhists from India shared teachings with Zoroastrians from Persia, and Greek traders exchanged stories with Chinese silk merchants. But the Silk Road was more than trade, it was a conduit for cultural exchange. Buddhism traveled east from India, taking root in China and influencing art, philosophy, and architecture. Chinese inventions like paper, gunpowder, and the compass made their way west, revolutionizing Europe centuries later. Diseases too followed the road. The Black Death may have originated in Asia and spread via these routes. The road's name, coined in the 19th century by German geographer Ferdinand von Richthofen, reflects silk's central role, but it carried far more, ideas that would change the world. As the Han dynasty flourished, the Silk Road became a lifeline. Emperor Wu's military campaigns secured the routes, establishing garrisons and watchtowers to protect caravans from Xiongnu raids. Diplomatic missions followed, with envoys like Jiang Qian's successors forging alliances and opening new paths. The road expanded, branching into northern and southern routes to bypass dangers, connecting China to Persia, India, and eventually Rome. Roman glass and wine flowed east, while Chinese silk and porcelain went west. But what hidden dangers lurked along these paths? And what lost knowledge was exchanged in the caravanserais under the starlit skies? The demand for silk was insatiable. In Rome, it was so prized that the Senate tried to ban it, fearing it drained the empire's gold. But the allure was too strong. Silk became a status symbol, worn by emperors and senators alike. This trade created wealth, but also dependency, as China guarded the secret of sericulture for centuries. Legends tell of smuggling silkworm eggs in bamboo staffs or princesses' headdresses, eventually breaking the monopoly. But the road's true magic was in the intangible, the spread of religions like Buddhism, which took root in China, influencing art and philosophy, or Zoroastrianism and Manichaeism finding new adherents. The road's formation from silk exchange was a catalyst for global connectivity, but it also sowed seeds of conflict as empires vied for control of the lucrative routes. The Han's wars with the Xiongnu were as much about securing trade as territory, with battles raging over oases like Turpin. These conflicts highlight the road's dual nature, a bridge of peace and a battleground of ambition. As we reflect on this ancient network, we are left with wonder at how a simple thread could weave together the fates of distant lands, and what other secrets lie buried along its forgotten paths. The origins of the Silk Road reveal a world where commerce and culture danced in a delicate balance, where the exchange of a single commodity could spark a global transformation. But as the road expanded, so did the mysteries it carried, tales of lost caravans, hidden oases, and treasures beyond imagination. What wonders awaited those brave enough to follow its winding trails? And what dangers lurked in the shadows of the desert night? These questions invite us to ponder the true power of connection and the enduring legacy of a path that linked the world long before our modern age. The first traders and explorers. The first traders and explorers of the Silk Road, emerging in the 2nd century BC, were the daring pioneers who transformed a nascent network of caravan trails into a lifeline connecting the ancient world, driven by the allure of silk and the ambition to forge ties across the vast deserts and mountains of Central Asia. At the heart of this story stands Zhang Qian, the Han Dynasty envoy whose perilous journeys, as chronicled in Sima Qian's records of the Grand Historian, opened the western routes that would define the Silk Road, but he was joined by countless unnamed merchants, Sogdians, Bactrians, and Parthians who braved bandit raids and treacherous terrains to carry silk, jade, and spices from China to distant markets in Persia and beyond. These early adventurers, navigating the steppes and oases with camel caravans under starlit skies, laid the foundations for a trade network that would reshape economies and cultures, raising questions about how their courage and curiosity bridged east and west, what secrets they carried through the sands, and how their journeys sparked a global exchange that would echo for centuries, leaving us to wonder about the untold stories of those who first tread the Silk Road's paths. The Silk Road's early development was catalyzed by the Han Dynasty's ambition under Emperor Wu's Yishir 141-87 BC, who sought to counter the nomadic Xiongnu threat and expand trade westward, as detailed in the Hanshu, Book of Han. Zhang Qian, a palace official born around 164 BC, was dispatched in 139 BC to seek an alliance with the Yuezhi, a nomadic people displaced by the Xiongnu to modern-day Afghanistan. His mission, as Sima Qian recounts, was fraught with peril. Captured by the Xiongnu shortly after departing Chang'an, Zhang endured a decade of captivity, marrying a Xiongnu woman and fathering a child, yet he maintained his loyalty to the Han. Escaping around 129 BC, he reached the Yuezhi in Bactria, only to find them uninterested in war, having settled into a peaceful life. Undeterred, Zhang explored Fergana, Sogdiana, and Parthia, documenting their cultures, goods, and military strengths, in reports that Sima Qian describes as revelatory, introducing China to heavenly horses of Fergana, swift stallions coveted for their cavalry, and sparking Emperor Wu's vision of a trade network to secure wealth and allies against the Xiongnu. Zhang's second mission in 115 BC, after returning to Chang'an in 126 BC, was a diplomatic triumph, establishing ties with kingdoms like Dayuan and Kangju, as recorded in the Hanshu. He escorted a caravan laden with silk and gold to exchange for horses, furs, and jade, formalizing routes through the Tarim Basin's oases like Dunhuang and Khotan. His journeys revealed a web of existing trade paths used by Sogdian merchants, a Persian-speaking people from Samarkand who became the Silk Road's backbone, as evidenced by archaeological finds like the Sogdian ancient letters discovered in a Dunhuang watchtower which detail their trade in silk, musk, and slaves across Central Asia. These merchants, skilled in languages and commerce, navigated the Taklamakan Desert's dunes, their camels laden with goods, resting at oases where caravanserais offered water and shelter under palm groves, raising questions about how they coordinated such vast journeys without maps and what skills enabled them to thrive in a land of sandstorms and bandits. The trader's world was one of diversity and danger, as Bactrian and Parthian merchants joined the Sogdians, carrying Chinese silk to markets in Merv and Ecbatana, where it was traded for glass, wool, and gold, as Pliny the Elder notes in Natural History, lamenting Rome's obsession with silk that drained its coffers. Parthian middlemen, controlling the route between Persia and Central Asia, profited immensely as their coins found in Turfan attest, but they also guarded the secret of silk production, which China protected fiercely, with the Hanshu recording penalties for revealing sericulture techniques. This secrecy fueled the Silk Road's mystique, as Western rulers speculated about silk's origins, with legends claiming it grew on trees, a misconception that added to its allure and drove trade, raising questions about how misinformation shaped economic demand and what role deception played in the route's early success. The explorers' journeys were not just commercial, but diplomatic, as Zhang Qian's missions opened channels for Han envoys to follow, like Ban Chao in the 1st century AD, who secured the Tarim Basin against Xiongnu raids, as recorded in the Book of the Later Han. These envoys, traveling with armed escorts, negotiated safe passage through kingdoms like Khotan, exchanging silk for loyalty, a practice that stabilized the route, but also entangled China in Central Asian politics, raising questions about whether trade or conquest drove the Silk Road's expansion and how diplomacy balanced the interests of rival powers. The merchants, often acting as spies, gathered intelligence on local rulers, as seen in Zhang's reports on Parthia's wealth and military, which Emperor Wu used to plan campaigns, blending trade with strategy in a delicate dance across the steppe. The dangers faced by these traders were immense, as the Taklamakan Desert's shifting sands could bury caravans, and bandits like the Xiongnu raided unprotected groups, as described in Sogdian letters, detailing losses to robbers. Oasis towns like Kashgar became vital hubs, their markets bustling with traders bartering in multiple tongues, as archaeological finds of Han coins and Persian glass reveal. These towns, fortified with mud brick walls, were cultural crossroads where Greek, Indian, and Chinese goods mingled, but they were also vulnerable to attack, raising questions about how traders survived such perilous journeys and what networks of trust sustained their commerce across thousands of miles. The early traders and explorers, like Zhang Qian, were more than merchants. They were pioneers who mapped the unknown, forging paths that would carry silk to Rome and ideas to China. Their courage opened a conduit for goods and cultures, but their stories, often unrecorded, leave gaps that fuel speculation about their lives and motives. As we explore this chapter, we are left with wonder at how these adventurers connected civilizations and curiosity about what secrets they carried through the deserts, weaving a network that would shape the ancient world. Goods traded along the route. The goods traded along the Silk Road from the 2nd century BC to the 14th century AD formed the lifeblood of a network that stretched from China's Han capital of Chang'an to the markets of Rome, carrying treasures like silk, spices, and jade that reshaped economies and ignited desires across continents. This ancient trade route, as chronicled in texts like Sima Qian's records of the Grand Historian and Pliny the Elder's Natural History, was not merely a path for commerce, but a conduit for wealth and power, where exotic goods transformed societies, fueled empires, and sparked rivalries that altered the course of history. From the shimmering silk that draped emperors to the pungent spices that flavored Roman feasts, these items were more than commodities. They were symbols of status, innovation, and mystery that drove merchants to brave deserts and mountains. As we delve into this chapter, we uncover the story of how these goods changed the global economy, raising questions about why they held such allure, how they reshaped civilizations, and what secrets of their trade reveal about the ancient world's interconnectedness, leaving us to wonder how a single thread or spice could wield such transformative power across the ages. Silk, the Silk Road's namesake, was China's most coveted export, a fabric so prized that it became a currency of diplomacy and wealth. This produced from silkworm cocoons in regions like Sichuan, as described in the Hanshu Book of Han. Silk was a closely guarded secret, with the Han dynasty enforcing strict laws against revealing sericulture techniques, punishable by death, according to legend. Its lightweight, lustrous quality made it ideal for trade, as merchants could carry bolts across the Taklamakan Desert without burdening their camels. In Parthia and Rome, silk was a status symbol, with Pliny the Elder lamenting in the 1st century AD that Roman elites spent millions of sesterces on silk robes, draining the empire's coffers and creating a trade imbalance that worried senators. The Hanshu records how silk was used as tribute to appease the Xiongnu nomads and as diplomatic gifts to Persian kings, fostering alliances but also spreading its allure westward, where it was dyed in vibrant purples and worn by emperors, raising questions about how a single fabric could command such wealth and whether its trade destabilized economies or strengthened diplomatic ties. Spices, particularly from India and Central Asia, were another cornerstone of Silk Road commerce, valued for their flavor, medicinal properties, and rarity. Black pepper, cinnamon, and saffron, sourced from India's Malabar coast and Persia, were transported through oases like Kashgar, as evidenced by Sogdian trade records found in Dunhuang. Pliny notes that pepper was worth more than its weight in gold in Rome, used to season meats and preserve food, while Chinese texts like the Wailue describe saffron's use in medicine and perfumes, coveted in Han courts for its golden hue. These spices, carried in small, precious bundles, transformed culinary and medicinal practices, with Roman recipes in Apicius's De Re Coquinaria, featuring pepper in nearly every dish, raising questions about how spices reshaped diets and whether their high cost fueled economic disparities or spurred exploration for new trade routes. Jade, prized in China for its spiritual significance, was a luxury good traded from Khotan in the Tarim Basin, where nephrite stones were mined from riverbeds, as described in the Book of the Later Han. Known as the Stone of Heaven, jade symbolized purity and immortality, carved into ritual objects for Han emperors, but it also reached Central Asia, where Sogdian merchants traded it for horses and furs, as seen in archaeological finds from Samarkand. Its durability made it ideal for long distance trade, but its cultural value in China, where it was more precious than gold, contrasted with its exotic appeal in Persia, raising questions about how cultural meanings shaped trade and whether jade's mystique drove its demand across civilizations. Other goods, like glass from Rome, incense from Arabia, and furs from the steppes, enriched the Silk Road's markets. Roman glass beads, found in Chinese tombs, were prized for their clarity, as Pliny describes, while frankincense and myrrh from Yemen, used in religious rituals, reached China via Parthia, as noted in the Wily Way. These exchanges, facilitated by Sogdian and Bactrian merchants, created a vibrant economy, with oasis towns like Turfan bustling with barter in multiple languages, as evidenced by Han coins and Persian pottery unearthed in the region. The trade's scale, with caravans carrying tons of goods across thousands of miles, transformed economies by fostering wealth in cities like Samarkand, but also sparked tensions as Parthian middlemen monopolized routes, inflating prices for Rome and China, raising questions about whether trade unified or divided empires. The economic impact was profound, as silk exports enriched Han China but strained Rome's treasury, with Pliny estimating annual losses of 100 million sesterces to Eastern trade. In Central Asia, Sogdian merchants amassed fortunes, as seen in their lavish tombs adorned with silk and jade, but this wealth also fueled banditry, as Sogdian letters describe raids on caravans. The trade stimulated urban growth, with cities like Chang'an and Palmyra thriving as trade hubs, but also created dependencies, as China's need for horses and Rome's for spices tied their economies to volatile routes, raising questions about whether the Silk Road's wealth stabilized or destabilized its participants. The trade also had cultural ripple effects, as goods carried ideas. Silk inspired Roman fashion, while Chinese bronze techniques influenced Persian metalwork, as seen in artifacts from Merv. The movement of goods required negotiation, with merchants learning languages like Sogdian and Greek, fostering a cosmopolitan culture in oases, but also spreading diseases like smallpox, which Roman sources like Galen note devastated markets, raising questions about how trade balanced prosperity with peril. The secrets of the Silk Road's goods lie in their transformative power, as silk, spices, and jade reshaped economies and cultures, but their trade also sowed tensions that would challenge empires. As we explore this chapter, we are left with wonder at how these treasures connected the ancient world and curiosity about what hidden stories of merchants and markets remain buried in the sands. Cultural exchanges and influences. The cultural exchanges and influences along the Silk Road, spanning from the 2nd century BC to the 14th century AD, transformed the ancient world by weaving a vibrant tapestry of ideas, art, and technology that flowed between East and West, reshaping civilizations from China to Rome. This vast network of trade routes, as documented in sources like Samatian's records of the Grand Historian, Persian Chronicles by Rashid al-Din, and European accounts by Marco Polo, was more than a conduit for goods like silk and spices. It was a highway for philosophies, artistic styles, and innovations that blended Greek, Persian, Indian, and Chinese traditions in the bustling oases of Central Asia. Merchants, monks, and travelers carried not just wares but beliefs, techniques, and aesthetics, creating a cultural crossroads in cities like Samarkand and Dunhuang that left an indelible mark on history. As we delve into this chapter, we uncover the story of how the Silk Road fused East and West, raising questions about how these exchanges shaped art and technology, what cultural secrets traveled its paths, and how this blending of worlds forged a legacy that endures, leaving us to wonder how a trade route became a catalyst for humanity's shared heritage. The Silk Road's cultural exchanges began with the Han Dynasty's opening of trade routes under Emperor Wu, whose envoy Zhang Qian, as recorded in the Hanshu, introduced to China to Central Asian cultures in the 2nd century BC. His reports of Bactria and Fergana brought knowledge of Hellenistic art, with Greek-inspired statues and coins found in sites like Ai Khanum, influencing Chinese sculpture, as seen in the terracotta warriors of Qin Shi Huang, which adopted realistic proportions from Western models. In return, Chinese silk and lacquerware reached Persia, where Parthian artisans incorporated dragon motifs into their textiles, as evidenced by finds in Palmyra, raising questions about how artistic styles crossed borders and whether they were deliberate exchanges or organic adaptations by traders exposed to diverse aesthetics in oasis markets. Buddhist art was a profound product of these exchanges, as Buddhism spread from India to China via the Silk Road, carried by monks like Faxian, who, in his 5th century record of Buddhist kingdoms, described monasteries in Khotan adorned with Indian-style stupas. The Mogao Caves near Dunhuang, a Silk Road hub, contain thousands of murals blending Indian, Persian, and Chinese elements, with Buddhas painted in flowing robes inspired by Gandharan art, a Greco-Buddhist style from modern Afghanistan, dated to the 4th century AD. These caves, as documented in archaeological studies, show Chinese artists adopting perspective and shading from Hellenistic traditions, raising questions about how religious art became a universal language and what role monks played in spreading these techniques across deserts. Technology also flowed along the route, with Chinese innovations like paper and printing reaching the Islamic world by the 8th century, as recorded by Arab chronicler Al-Jahiz. Captured Chinese artisans after the Battle of Talas in 751 introduced papermaking to Samarkand, enabling the Islamic Golden Age's literary boom, with libraries in Baghdad producing manuscripts that preserved Greek texts, later influencing Europe's Renaissance. In return, Chinese engineers adopted Persian water wheel designs, as seen in irrigation systems along the Tarim Basin, enhancing agriculture, as noted in the Book of the Later Han. This exchange of technology raises questions about how practical knowledge traveled faster than goods and whether it transformed societies more than trade itself. The Silk Road facilitated philosophical exchanges, with Confucianism, Taoism, and Zoroastrianism mingling in Central Asian cities. Sogdian merchants, as revealed in their Dunhuang letters, adopted Buddhist practices while maintaining Zoroastrian rituals, creating syncretic beliefs that influenced Chinese mysticism, as seen in Tang Dynasty texts blending Taoist and Buddhist cosmology. Greek philosophy, preserved in Bactrian libraries, reached China through translations, with concepts like Stoicism echoing in Han scholar debates, raising questions about how abstract ideas crossed linguistic barriers and whether they shaped governance in empires like the Tang or Parthian states. Artistic influences extended to music and dance, with Persian lutes and Indian sitars appearing in Chinese courts, as depicted in Tang tomb frescoes, while Central Asian whirling dances, described by Marco Polo in Travels, inspired performances in Baghdad. These exchanges created a shared aesthetic, with Sogdian murals in Samarkand showing Chinese dragons alongside Persian floral motifs, blending cultures in a visual dialogue that transcended borders, raising questions about how artists communicated across languages and what inspired their fusion of styles in markets where traders bartered in Sogdian, Greek, and Chinese. The Silk Road's cultural exchanges were not without tension, as religious and philosophical differences sparked conflicts. The spread of Buddhism clashed with Confucian orthodoxy in China, as Tang records note debates over foreign monks, while Zoroastrian communities in Central Asia resisted Islamic expansion after the 7th century, as recorded by al-Biruni. These frictions highlight the challenges of cultural integration, raising questions about whether the Silk Road unified or divided societies and how traders navigated these tensions in cosmopolitan hubs like Kashgar. The legacy of these exchanges is evident in the modern world, with Chinese paper shaping global literacy and Buddhist art influencing East Asian aesthetics. Archaeological finds, like Greco-Buddhist statues in Gandhara, reveal of a world where cultures met and merged, but mysteries remain. How did traders share complex ideas without written contracts? What lost texts or artifacts lie buried in Silk Road oases? As we explore this chapter, we are left with wonder at how the Silk Road wove a cultural mosaic and curiosity about what secrets of its exchanges remain hidden in the sands of time. The role of caravans and oases. The role of caravans and oases along the Silk Road, flourishing from the 2nd century BC to the 14th century AD, forms the beating heart of a trade network that stretched from China's Chang'an to the markets of Rome, transforming perilous desert journeys into lifelines of commerce and culture. Across the vast expanses of the Taklamakan and Gobi deserts, caravans of camels laden with silk, spices, and jade trudged through sandstorms and scorching heat, guided by merchants who relied on oases like Samarkand, Dunhuang, and Kashgar as sanctuaries of water, shelter, and trade. These oasis towns, as documented in Chinese texts like the Hanshu and Sogdian records such as the ancient letters, were not just rest stops, but vibrant hubs where goods, ideas, and languages mingled under palm groves and starlit skies. The caravans, led by traders like the Sogdians, faced bandits, thirst, and treacherous terrain, yet their resilience forged a path that connected east and west, raising questions about how these travelers survived such harrowing journeys, what secrets they guarded in their caravans, and how Oase became cultural crossroads that shaped the ancient world, leaving us to wonder about the untold stories of those who braved the Silk Road's deserts. The caravans were the lifeblood of the Silk Road, composed of dozens to hundreds of camels, each carrying up to 500 pounds of goods, as described in the Wailue, a 3rd century Chinese text. Camels, with their ability to endure days without water, were ideal for crossing the Taklamakan Desert, where temperatures soared above 100 degrees and sand dunes shifted like waves, threatening to bury travelers. Merchants, primarily Sogdians from Central Asia, organized these caravans with military precision, traveling in groups for safety, their bells jingling in the desert silence, as noted in archaeological finds from Dunhuang. The Sogdian ancient letters, discovered in a 4th century watchtower, reveal detailed accounts of caravan leaders coordinating routes, bartering silk for horses and hiring armed escorts to fend off bandits like the Xiongnu, who ambushed traders for their precious cargo, raising questions about how these merchants maintained trust across vast distances and what strategies ensured their survival in such hostile lands. Oases like Samarkand, located in modern Uzbekistan, were critical to the caravan's survival, serving as fortified market towns where traders rested, refilled water skins, and exchanged goods. Samarkand, as described by Ptolemy in his geography, was a Sogdian hub with mud brick walls and bustling bazaars where silk, jade, and spices traded hands alongside Persian glass and Indian cotton. The city's irrigation systems, fed by the Zarafshan River, supported lush gardens that provided fruit and shade, as evidenced by archaeological remains of Sogdian murals depicting traders and camels. Dunhuang, at the edge of the Gobi Desert, was another vital oasis, its Crescent Lake oasis offering respite, as recorded by Buddhist monk Faxian in his 5th century record of Buddhist kingdoms. The Mogao Caves near Dunhuang, adorned with murals of merchants and monks, reveal a cosmopolitan world where Chinese, Indian, and Persian cultures mingled, raising questions about how these oases sustained such diversity and what role they played in fostering cultural exchange beyond mere trade. Kashgar, at the crossroads of the northern and southern Silk Road routes, was a melting pot where Sogdian, Chinese, and Bactrian merchants bartered in multiple languages, as seen in Han Dynasty coins and Parthian pottery unearthed there. The Hanshu notes that Kashgar's markets traded silk for Fergana horses, prized for their speed, while Sogdian records detail sales of slaves and spices, highlighting the oasis's role as a commercial hub. These towns were fortified with garrisons, as the Han Dynasty established outposts like Dunhuang's Jade Gate to protect traders. But they were also vulnerable to raids, as Sogdian letters describe losses to bandits who struck under cover of sandstorms, raising questions about how oases balanced security with openness and what defenses protected their wealth. The caravan's journeys were fraught with peril, as the Taklamakan Desert's name, meaning go in and you won't come out, reflected its dangers. Travelers faced dehydration, extreme cold at night, and navigational challenges, relying on stars and local guides to find oases, as described in Faxian's accounts of monks lost in sandstorms. Caravans carried portable yurts and dried foods like millet and mare's milk, but water scarcity forced reliance on oases, where wells were guarded like treasures. The Sogdian letters recount merchants' fears of betrayal by partners or guides, raising questions about how trust was maintained in a trade network spanning thousands of miles and what rituals or agreements bound these diverse travelers. So oases were cultural crossroads, hosting temples, mosques, and monasteries that reflected the Silk Road's religious diversity. Samarkand's Zoroastrian fire temples stood alongside Buddhist stupas, as noted by archaeologist Aurel Stein, while Dunhuang's caves preserved Christian and Manichaean texts, indicating a blending of faiths. Merchants like the Sogdians, fluent in multiple languages, acted as cultural brokers, spreading Persian poetry and Chinese calligraphy, as seen in manuscripts from Turfan, raising questions about how these interactions shaped art and ideas, and what lost stories of cross-cultural exchange remain buried in oasis ruins. The caravans and oases facilitated economic transformation, as silk and spices enriched Central Asian cities, but also sparked tensions as Parthian middlemen inflated prices, as Pliny the Elder complains in Natural History. The wealth of oases like Bukhara attracted invaders, including the Mongols in the 13th century, who razed cities but later rebuilt them, as recorded by Giovanni, raising questions about whether oases were engines of prosperity or targets for conquest. As we explore this chapter, we are left with wonder at how caravans and oases connected civilizations and curiosity about what secrets of their journeys remain hidden in the sands. Famous travelers like Marco Polo. The journeys of famous travelers like Marco Polo along the Silk Road in the 13th century illuminate a vibrant chapter in the history of this ancient trade network where adventurers, merchants, and monks braved perilous routes to connect east and west, carrying tales of wonder that shaped medieval perceptions of the world. Marco Polo, a Venetian merchant born around 1254, stands as the most iconic of these travelers, whose account, The Travels of Marco Polo, offers a vivid glimpse into the Mongol Empire under Kublai Khan, detailing exotic courts, bustling markets, and distant lands that captivated Europe. As recorded in his book, dictated to Rustichello da Pisa while imprisoned in Genoa around 1298. Polo's adventures from Venice to China and back reveal the Silk Road's role as a conduit for exploration and storytelling. But his tales, blending fact with possible exaggeration, raise questions about their accuracy and the mysteries they conceal. Alongside Polo, other travelers like the Chinese monk Faxian and the Moroccan scholar Ibn Battuta traverse the route, leaving accounts that enrich our understanding of its cultural and economic tapestry. As we delve into this chapter, we uncover the stories of these intrepid explorers, raising questions about what drove them to cross deserts and mountains, what secrets they uncovered in their journeys, and how their tales fueled the Silk Road's enduring mystique, leaving us to wonder about the truths hidden in their wanderings. Marco Polo's journey began in 1271 when, at age 17, he set out from Venice with his father Niccolo and uncle Maffeo, who had previously traveled to the Mongol court of Kublai Khan in the 1260s, as described in the Travels. The Polos, merchants trading in gems and cloth, aimed to strengthen ties with the Mongols, whose Pax Mongolica ensured safe passage along the Silk Road. Departing Venice, they sailed to Acre, then traveled overland through Persia, crossing the Pamir Mountains to reach Kashgar, a bustling oasis market described by Polo as teeming with silk, jade, and spices, where Sogdian and Chinese traders bartered under mud brick arches. From there, they traversed the Taklamakan Desert, resting at oases like Dunhuang, where Polo marveled at Buddhist monasteries, adorned with murals, as archaeological finds from the Mogo caves confirm, reflecting the Silk Road's cultural richness. After 3.5 years, the Polos reached Kublai Khan's summer capital at Chengdu in 1275, a city Polo describes as a paradise of marble palaces and gardens, though his account may embellish for European audiences. Kublai, impressed by Marco's curiosity, employed him as an envoy, sending him to China, Burma, and possibly India, as Polo recounts missions to Yunnan and the Mongol-controlled south, where he observed rice paddies and paper currency, innovations unknown in Europe. His descriptions of Dadu, modern Beijing, with its grand canals and 12 gates, align with the Yuanshi, which details Kublai's capital, but Polo's claim of serving as governor of Yangzhou is doubted by historians, as no Chinese records confirm it, raising questions about whether he exaggerated his role or if records were lost. Polo's travels captivated Europe with tales of China's wealth, silk markets, coal mines, and porcelain, introducing concepts like paper money, which the Yuan Shi confirms was used under Kublai, though Polo's omission of the Great Wall and tea fuels debate about his accuracy. His account of Kublai's court, where feasts featured mare's milk and venison served to thousands, reflects Mongol opulence, but his stories of zip lines for hawks and magical stones may blend observation with folklore, as noted by scholars like Francis Wood, raising questions about what Polo truly saw and what he embellished to enchant his readers. Other travelers enriched the Silk Road's narrative. Faxian, a 5th century Chinese Buddhist monk, journeyed to India via the Silk Road, as recorded in his Record of Buddhist Kingdoms, describing Khotan's monasteries and Gandharan stupas, which influenced Chinese Buddhism through texts he carried back. His accounts of oasis life, with caravans resting under palm groves, align with Polo's descriptions, but his focus on Buddhist relics contrasts with Polo's commercial lens, raising questions about how travelers' purposes shaped their observations. Ibn Battuta, a 14th century Moroccan scholar, traveled the Silk Road to China, as detailed in his Rila, noting Samarkand's markets and Mongol governance, offering an Islamic perspective that complements Polo's Christian view, highlighting the route's diversity. The dangers faced by these travelers were immense, as Polo recounts bandit attacks in Persia and sandstorms in the Gobi, while Faxian describes near starvation in the Taklamakan. Their survival depended on oases like Bukhara, where Sogdian merchants provided supplies, as seen in archaeological finds of Han coins and Persian glass. These hubs were cultural crossroads, blending Greek, Indian, and Chinese influences, as evidenced by Bactrian sculptures, but also vulnerable to raids, raising questions about how travelers navigated such perils and what networks of trust sustained them. The legacy of Polo and his contemporaries lies in their role as cultural bridges, introducing Europe to Asia's wonders and sparking exploration, as Polo's tales inspired Christopher Columbus. Their accounts, though questioned for accuracy, shaped medieval maps and fueled curiosity, but mysteries remain. Did Polo truly reach China, or did he rely on second-hand tales? What lost stories did other travelers leave unwritten? As we explore this chapter, we are left with wonder at their courage and curiosity about what secrets their journeys hold, buried in the sands of the Silk Road. Dangers and challenges on the road. The dangers and challenges on the Silk Road were as legendary as the treasures it carried, a gauntlet of perils that tested the limits of human endurance and turned every journey into a gamble with fate, where the promise of fortune hung in precarious balance against the threat of utter ruin. These hazards were not mere obstacles, but integral threads in the road's tapestry, weaving stories of heroism, tragedy, and survival that have echoed through the ages, leaving us to wonder how anyone dared to traverse this path of silk and shadows. From the scorching deserts, where the sun beat down like a merciless hammer, to the icy mountain passes, where blizzards howled like vengeful spirits, the road was a relentless adversary, demanding vigilance, cunning, and a touch of luck from those who braved it. The most immediate and terrifying danger came from the human predators who lurked along the route, bandits and pirates of the desert, shadowy figures who struck like lightning from the dunes, their motives as simple as greed and as complex as survival in a lawless land. These raiders, often nomadic tribes displaced by the expanding empires or opportunistic warlords seeking quick wealth, preyed on caravans with ruthless efficiency, ambushing them in narrow passes or at waterholes where travelers were forced to stop. The Taklamakan Desert, known as the Sea of Death, was particularly infamous for its sand pirates, who rode camels swift as the wind, their faces wrapped in scarves to shield against the blowing grit, descending upon weary merchants with curved swords and arrows that whistled like death's own call. Stories abound of entire caravans vanishing into the sands, their bones bleached white by the sun, picked clean by vultures, leaving behind only echoes of screams and the faint tracks of looted goods scattered like breadcrumbs for the next unlucky soul. To counter these threats, caravan masters employed guards, hardened warriors from the steppes, or mercenaries with loyalties bought by gold, who rode at the flanks, their eyes scanning the horizon for the telltale dust clouds that signaled an attack. But cunning was as important as strength. Merchants often disguised valuable cargo in mundane bundles or paid tribute to local tribes for safe passage, forging uneasy alliances that could turn treacherous at a moment's notice. Yet even these precautions sometimes failed, as bandits grew bolder, using decoys or infiltrating caravans as spies to strike from within, raising questions about trust in a world where every stranger could be a foe in disguise. How many fortunes were lost to these desert phantoms, and what buried hoards of silk and silver still lie hidden beneath the shifting sands, waiting for a fortunate explorer to unearth them? Beyond human foes, the road's natural dangers were equally formidable, with weather that could shift from blistering heat to bone-chilling cold in a single day, turning the journey into a battle against the elements that claimed more lives than any bandit could. In the Gobi Desert, temperatures soared to over 50 degrees Celsius by day, baking the earth into a cracked mosaic where mirages danced like cruel illusions of water just out of reach, luring thirsty travelers to their doom as they wandered off the path in delirium. At night, the mercury plunged below freezing, turning sweat-soaked clothes into icy shrouds that sapped the warmth from bones and left men shivering in their tents, their breath visible in the frigid air like ghosts departing the body. Storms were the road's most unpredictable terror, sandstorms that rose like towering walls of grit, blotting out the sun and burying everything in their path, where visibility dropped to zero and the howling winds drowned out cries for help, leaving caravans disoriented and scattered, their camels panicking and bolting into the void. These tempests could last for days, stripping skin from flesh and filling lungs with dust that choked the life from the unwary, raising questions about how many lost souls still wander those dunes as restless spirits, their bones polished white by the relentless sands. In the mountains, snowstorms and avalanches posed similar threats, with passes like the Karakoram becoming death traps, where frozen bodies piled up like grim markers for those who followed, their frozen gazes a warning to turn back before it's too late. Disease was the road's silent killer, a shadow that stalked every caravan with insidious patience, spreading through contaminated water, at oases or fleas in the fur of pack animals, turning thriving groups into ghostly processions of the dying. Bubonic plague, cholera, and dysentery were common scourges, with symptoms that struck without warning, feverish delusions in the heat of the day, cramps that bent men double in agony, or boils that swelled like curses from the gods themselves. Merchants carried remedies like herbal poultices or amulets inscribed with protective spells, but these often failed against the invisible foe, leaving behind trails of shallow graves marked by simple stones, if marked at all, raising chilling questions about how many unmarked burials line the road's forgotten paths, their occupants forever lost to the annals of history. The psychological toll was as deadly as the physical dangers, with isolation and monotony driving men to madness, where the endless horizon played tricks on the mind, conjuring phantoms from the heat haze or voices in the wind that spoke of home and loved ones left behind. Caravans often hired storytellers or musicians to keep spirits high during the long marches, their tales of heroic deeds or forbidden loves providing a balm against the despair that could lead to desertion or suicide. But even these distractions couldn't always ward off the demons of doubt that whispered in the dark hours, making us wonder how many travelers simply walked into the wilderness, never to be seen again, their fates swallowed by the silence of the desert. Despite these perils, the caravans pressed on, their determination a testament to the human spirit's resilience, forging bonds of camaraderie that transcended language and culture as strangers became brothers under the shared burdens of survival. These journeys were not just about trade, but about the exchange of stories around the campfire, where a Chinese merchant might share the legend of the Monkey King with a Persian traveler, blending myths that would evolve into new tales carried further along the road, raising questions about how much of our modern folklore was born in these fleeting encounters under the stars. The oases that dotted the route were oases of life in more ways than one, serving as vital rest stops where water flowed cool from underground springs and date palms offered shade and sustenance. But they also became hubs of intrigue where spies disguised as traders eavesdropped on conversations, gathering intelligence for distant emperors who sought to control the flow of goods and information. In places like Samarkand or Kashgar, the air was alive with the babble of tongues, Chinese, Persian, Arabic, and more, as deals were struck in shadowed corners of caravanserais, massive inns with courtyards for camels and rooms for weary souls, where a slip of the tongue could mean the difference between profit and peril, and where forbidden romances blossomed between merchants of different worlds, their unions producing children who would carry the road's hybrid heritage into the future. These oases were melting pots of culture, where a Buddhist monk from India might debate philosophy with a Zoroastrian priest from Persia, exchanging ideas that would spark innovations in medicine, astronomy, and art. But they also harbored dangers like pickpockets who slinked through the crowds or assassins hired by rivals to eliminate competition, adding a layer of suspense to every stop along the way that makes us wonder how many untold stories of betrayal and survival lie buried in their sands. The caravan's dependence on these oases for water and rest made them vulnerable as a poisoned well or a besieged city could spell doom for hundreds, leaving behind ghost towns where the wind howls through empty bazaars, a reminder of the road's fragility in the face of human greed and nature's wrath. The dangers from desert pirates were a constant threat. Bands of outlaws who roamed the dunes on swift camels, their faces veiled against the blowing sand as they lay in wait for unwary caravans, striking with arrows from the shadows, or charging with curved swords that gleamed like crescent moons under the starlight. These sea pirates of the desert, as they were called, were often former nomads displaced by the expanding empires, their knowledge of the terrain making them deadly adversaries who could appear and disappear like mirages, leaving behind trails of looted goods and slain travelers that served as grim warnings to those who followed. Caravan masters countered with armed guards and decoy caravans, but the tension of constant vigilance wore on the soul, leading to paranoia where every stranger at an oasis was suspected of being a spy, and every rustle in the night could signal an attack that might end the journey in bloodshed. Disease was an invisible foe that stalked the route like a shadow, spreading through contaminated water at oases or fleas in the fur of pack animals, turning thriving caravans into processions of the dying as fever and dysentery claimed lives with merciless speed. The Black Death in the 14th century is believed to have traveled the Silk Road, carried by rats in the holds of ships and the packs of merchants, decimating populations from China to Europe and raising chilling questions about how a simple trade route could become a highway for death, altering the course of history in ways that still echo today. Time itself was a challenge, with journeys lasting months or years, testing the limits of human endurance as travelers battled exhaustion, homesickness, and the monotony of endless horizons that could drive men mad with their unchanging vastness. Yet, in this crucible of hardship, bonds were forged that transcended culture and creed, as a Chinese silk trader might share his fire with a Persian spice merchant, exchanging stories that blended their worlds in ways that would influence art, science, and philosophy for generations to come. The Silk Road's dangers and challenges were the forge that tempered its legacy, a path where every step was a victory over adversity, and where the true treasures were not just the goods carried, but the resilience of those who walked it. As we reflect on this ancient role, we are left with a sense of wonder at the human spirit's capacity to endure, and a curiosity about the untold stories that lie buried along its forgotten trails. The Silk Road invites us to keep exploring, to keep questioning, and to keep dreaming of the wonders that await beyond the next horizon. The spread of religions. The Silk Road was not just a conduit for silk, spices, and gold. It was a spiritual highway where religions flowed like rivers, carrying beliefs, rituals, and philosophies from one end of the known world to the other, blending faiths in ways that would reshape civilizations and leave behind mysteries about how ideas could travel farther and faster than armies or merchants ever dreamed. This exchange of religions along the road was a subtle yet profound force, where the footsteps of pilgrims and the whispers of missionaries wove a tapestry of spiritual diversity that continues to influence our world today, raising questions about how a single monk's journey or a trader's tale could spark transformations that echoed through centuries. As we explore the spread of Buddhism, Islam, and Christianity along this ancient path, we uncover stories of enlightenment, conquest, and quiet conversion that make us wonder what other forgotten faiths might have been lost in the sands, waiting to be rediscovered by those curious enough to follow the road's hidden trails. Buddhism, born in the 5th century BCE in the plains of northern India, from the teachings of Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha who sought enlightenment under the Bodhi tree, found its wings on the Silk Road, spreading eastward to China and beyond in a journey that transformed it from a local philosophy into a global religion. But the path was fraught with challenges that make its success all the more mysterious. The first Buddhist missionaries, inspired by Emperor Ashoka's edicts in the 3rd century BCE, ventured west into Central Asia, where they encountered Greek kingdoms left by Alexander the Great, blending Hellenistic art with Buddhist iconography to create the Gandharan style. Statues of the Buddha with wavy hair and toga like robes that seem to whisper of cultural fusions we can scarcely imagine. But it was the Kushan Empire in the 1st century CE that truly propelled Buddhism along the road, with King Kanishka patronizing monks who carried sutras, sacred texts written on palm leaves or silk scrolls, through the mountain passes of the Hindu Kush, where avalanches and bandits lurked like shadows, testing the faith of those who dared to spread the Dharma. As Buddhism traveled east, it encountered the Han Dynasty in China, where Emperor Ming reportedly dreamed of a golden figure flying from the west, prompting him to send envoys who returned with Buddhist scriptures and monks around 67 CE. But the real influx came with the translation efforts of figures like Lokaksema in the 2nd century, who rendered Sanskrit texts into Chinese, adapting concepts like karma and nirvana to resonate with Taoist and Confucian ideas, creating a hybrid faith that would flourish in temples like the White Horse Temple in Luoyang, said to be China's first Buddhist monastery. The road's caravans became unwitting missionaries, carrying statues of the Buddha carved from jade or sandalwood, their compassionate eyes seeming to watch over the travelers as they crossed the Gobi Desert, where mirages danced like illusions of enlightenment, tempting the weary with visions of oases that might hold not just water, but spiritual solace. But how did Buddhism, a religion of peace and detachment, survive the road's violence, where raids by nomadic tribes could wipe out entire groups, leaving scrolls scattered like leaves in the wind? The mystery deepens when we consider the hidden caves of Dunhuang, where thousands of Buddhist manuscripts were sealed away in the 11th century, only to be rediscovered in 1900, revealing texts that had traveled the road centuries earlier, their words a testament to the faith's resilience. From the sands of Central Asia to the courts of Chinese emperors, Buddhism's spread along the Silk Road was a miracle of adaptation, where monks like Xuanzang in the 7th century braved 16 years of travel to India, crossing bandit-infested passes and debating with kings, returning with 657 texts that would enrich Chinese Buddhism and inspire the classic novel Journey to the West. A tale of a monk and his mythical companions that blends adventure with spiritual quest. But Xuanzang's real journey was even more perilous, with encounters of treacherous rivers where his boat nearly capsized and deserts where thirst drove men mad, raising questions about what divine protection or sheer luck saw him through. The road also carried Buddhism to Korea and Japan, where it took root in the 6th century through envoys like the monk Hyeja, who brought statues and sutras that would influence Zen and Shingon sects, but not without resistance from local shamanistic traditions that viewed the foreign faith as a threat, leading to conflicts where temples were burned and monks persecuted before eventual acceptance. This spread raises intriguing mysteries about how a religion of nonviolence conquered hearts across such diverse and often hostile lands, and what lost Buddhist sects or hybrid beliefs might have flourished and faded along the way, their teachings buried in forgotten monasteries waiting for modern explorers to unearth. As Islam rose in the 7th century from the Arabian Peninsula, its spread along the Silk Road was a whirlwind of conquest and conversion that transformed the spiritual landscape of Asia. But the road's role in this expansion is a tale of trade, tolerance, and the subtle power of ideas as that flowed as freely as the caravans themselves. The Prophet Muhammad's death in 632 CE sparked the Rashidun Caliphate's rapid expansion, reaching Persia by 651 CE and opening the eastern routes. Muslim traders, known for their honesty and protected by the caliph's peace, carried the faith eastward, establishing communities in oases like Kashgar, where mosques rose beside Buddhist temples, creating a mosaic of beliefs that blended in unexpected ways. But this harmony often masked tensions, as conversions sometimes led to rebellions or forced migrations that reshaped demographics in ways we can only guess at today. By the 8th century, under the Abbasid Caliphate, Islam had reached China, where merchants built the Weisheng Mosque in Guangzhou, said to be one of the oldest in the world, its minaret a lighthouse for sailors navigating the South China Sea. But the faith's spread was slow, taking root among Hui communities who blended Confucian ethics with Islamic law, raising questions about how Islam adapted to Confucian hierarchies without losing its core principles. The road also carried Islam westward to Europe, where in Spain under the Umayyads it fostered a golden age of learning in Córdoba, where libraries held ancient Greek texts translated into Arabic, influencing the Renaissance centuries later. But this exchange also sparked crusades and conflicts that left scars on history, making us wonder what peaceful alternatives might have been if tolerance had prevailed. The spread of Christianity along the Silk Road is a lesser known chapter, a quiet undercurrent beneath the dominant flows of Buddhism and Islam. But its journey from the west to the east is a tale of perseverance and adaptation that raises fascinating questions about how a faith born in the Middle East found footholds in the temples of China and the steppes of Central Asia. Christianity first trickled eastward through Nestorian missionaries in the 5th century who fled persecution in the Byzantine Empire and found refuge in Persia, where they translated the Bible into Syriac and carried it along the road to China, establishing churches in Chang'an by 635 AD during the Tang Dynasty, where Emperor Taizong welcomed the monk Alopen and his luminous religion that blended with Taoist concepts of harmony. The Xi'an Stele, erected in 781 AD, describes this arrival, but its inscriptions hint at lost texts and forgotten sects that may have fused Christian salvation with Buddhist nirvana, creating hybrid beliefs whose traces are now buried in remote monasteries, leaving us to ponder what spiritual syntheses were born and lost in these cultural crossroads. As Islam spread, Christianity faced competition, but it persisted through Armenian traders and Nestorian communities in Central Asia, where churches dotted the oases and monks negotiated with Mongol khans for protection, leading to curious alliances like the one with Kublai Khan, who employed Christian physicians in his court and allowed missions that brought the faith to the steppes. But these efforts were often thwarted by nomadic migrations and religious rivalries that swept away fragile congregations, raising questions about what lost gospels or hybrid rituals might lie hidden in the ruins of ancient Silk Road cities. The road's role in spreading Christianity westward is less documented, but Byzantine icons and relics traveled east to west, influencing art in Venice and Constantinople, where silk clad merchants carried crucifixes alongside spices, blending faith with commerce in ways that make us wonder how many forgotten pilgrims walked these paths, their prayers mingling with the dust of distant lands. These spreads of religion along the Silk Road were not just migrations of faith, but catalysts for profound cultural transformations that reshaped societies in ways we are still unraveling today, leaving behind mysteries about how beliefs evolved in the crucible of exchange and what lost syncretic faiths might have flourished in the shadows of history. The road's spiritual legacy is a testament to human curiosity and adaptability, a reminder that ideas, like goods, can travel far and change everything in their path. Decline of the Silk Road. The decline of the Silk Road was not a sudden eclipse, but a gradual fading of its once brilliant light as the forces of war, disease, and innovation conspired to dim the paths that had connected East and West for centuries, leaving behind a legacy of lost fortunes and forgotten tales that continue to whisper through the winds of history. This unraveling began in the later centuries of the road's golden age, when the stability that had allowed caravans to traverse vast deserts and mountain passes started to crumble under the weight of human conflict, natural calamity, and the inexorable march of progress, raising profound questions about how such a vital artery of global exchange could wither away and what hidden impacts its fall had on the civilizations it once nourished. The first and most destructive blow came from the ceaseless drumbeat of war, as empires rose and fell along the road's fragile threads, turning oases into battlegrounds and trade routes into lines of advance for armies hungry for conquest and control. In the 13th century, the Mongol invasions under Genghis Khan and his successors initially revitalized the road by uniting vast swaths of Asia under the Pax Mongolica, a period of relative peace where merchants could travel from China to Persia without fear, their caravans protected by the Khan's iron rule and the promise of swift justice for bandits who dared to prey on them. Yet this unity was forged in blood. The Mongols' conquests left cities like Samarkand and Bukhara in ruins, their markets silent, and their inhabitants slaughtered or scattered, disrupting trade for generations as survivors rebuilt from the ashes. The Mongols' own internal divisions, after Kublai Khan's death in 1294, fractured the empire into khanates that warred among themselves, turning the road into a no man's land where rival armies clashed and caravans became targets for looting, making merchants think twice before risking their lives and livelihoods on paths that once promised riches but now delivered only danger. War's shadow extended further with the rise of the Ottoman Empire in the 15th century, which captured Constantinople in 1453 and blocked European access to the eastern routes, forcing traders to seek alternatives that bypassed the Silk Road altogether and hastening its decline as the flow of goods slowed to a trickle. The Ottomans' control over the Levant and their conflicts with the Safavid Empire in Persia created choke points where tolls soared and safety plummeted, with bandits disguised as toll collectors ambushing caravans in the narrow passes of the Zagros Mountains, where echoes of screams could linger for days in the rocky canyons. These wars not only disrupted trade, but also destroyed infrastructure. Bridges collapsed under marching armies. Oases were poisoned to deny water to enemies, and ancient caravanserais, once havens of rest, became fortified outposts where spies lurked in the shadows, gathering intelligence that could doom an entire expedition with a whispered word to the wrong ear. The relentless conflicts also sowed seeds of cultural mistrust. As religious divides deepened between Muslim caliphates and Christian kingdoms, leading to crusades and jihads that turned the road's melting pots into flashpoints of violence, where a merchant's faith could mean the difference between safe passage and a swift death at the hands of zealots who saw trade as a threat to purity. This era of war raises haunting questions about the human cost of empire. How many nameless traders perished in forgotten skirmishes, their bones bleaching under the sun as their cargoes rotted in the dust? And what lost opportunities for peace and prosperity were squandered in the name of conquest? Beyond the clamor of battle, a more insidious enemy stalked the Silk Road, the silent killer of disease, which traveled its paths like an unseen ghost, claiming lives with a touch that no sword could parry, and leaving behind the trails of devastation that could empty entire caravans in days. The road's role in spreading plagues was a double-edged sword, as the same connections that brought wealth also carried contagions from one end of Eurasia to the other, turning bustling markets into graveyards where the cough of a stranger could spell doom for a whole city. The Black Death in the 14th century is the most infamous example, believed to have originated in Central Asia and spread westward along the road's caravans, where fleas on rats nesting in packs of furs and grains jumped from host to host, infecting merchants who then carried the bubonic plague to oases and ports, where it exploded into pandemics that wiped out a third of Europe's population. But how did disease travel so swiftly? Caravans, with their close quarters and shared water sources, were perfect breeding grounds, where a feverish traveler could infect dozens before symptoms showed, and oases like Kashgar became hotspots where the sick mingled with the healthy, spreading the illness like wildfire through dry grass. Traders from India brought smallpox, while those from the steppe carried bubonic plague, and the road's connectivity amplified the horror as infected fleas hitched rides on camels, crossing the Gobi, surviving the cold nights in the warmth of saddlebags, only to emerge in the next town with deadly intent. These outbreaks not only decimated populations, but also disrupted trade, as cities closed their gates to caravans suspected of carrying the Black Wind, leading to economic collapse and famine that weakened empires and shifted power in ways that still puzzle historians today. The Mongol conquests, while unifying the road, also accelerated disease spread, as armies carried pathogens across borders, infecting conquered peoples and leaving behind ghost towns where the dead outnumbered the living, raising chilling questions about whether the road's golden age was built on a foundation of suffering that ultimately contributed to its downfall. The 14th century plague, for instance, is thought to have originated near Lake Issyk-Kul in Kyrgyzstan, where gravestones from 1338 describe a pestilence that killed entire villages, and from there it hitchhiked on caravans to the Black Sea, where Genoese traders carried it to Europe, unleashing the Black Death that killed 75 million people. This pandemic's role in the road's decline is profound, as fear of contagion led to quarantines and trade bans that strangled the flow of goods. but it also sparked medical innovations like quarantine practices that echo in our modern world, leaving us to wonder what other lost remedies or knowledge were born from this dark chapter. Time and weather were equally merciless foes on the Silk Road, where the elements could turn a profitable journey into a desperate fight for survival, with extremes that tested the limits of human endurance and left behind tales of heroism and heartbreak that still resonate today. The road's diverse terrains, from the scorching deserts of the Taklamakan, where temperatures soared to 50 degrees Celsius and sandstorms could bury a caravan in hours, to the freezing passes of the Pamirs, where blizzards howled like wolves and frostbite claimed fingers and toes, demanded constant vigilance, as a sudden shift in weather could mean the difference between life and death. In the Gobi Desert, known as the Sea of Death, travelers faced the black wind, sandstorms that rose like towering walls, blotting out the sun and filling lungs with grit that choked the breath from the living, while the heat by day could fry an egg on a rock, and the cold by night freeze water in skins to solid ice. Caravans adapted with face veils and camel humps for water storage, but stories abound of lost souls wandering in mirages, visions of oases that vanished like dreams upon approach, leaving behind bleached bones as warnings to those who followed. The monsoon rains in India could turn dry riverbeds into raging torrents, sweeping away entire groups in flash floods that came without warning, while in the Himalayas, avalanches buried paths under tons of snow, preserving bodies in ice like frozen relics from a forgotten age. These weather woes not only claimed lives, but disrupted trade, with delayed caravans leading to spoiled goods and bankrupt merchants, raising questions about how the road survived such unpredictability and what ancient forecasting methods, like observing bird migrations or cloud patterns, might have been lost to time. The oases, those green refuges amid the barrenness, were lifelines where travelers replenished supplies, but even they could betray, as droughts dried up springs or locust swarms devoured crops, turning havens into wastelands overnight. The Silk Road's dangers were a crucible that forged legends, where survivors became heroes with tales that blended fact and fiction, like the story of a caravan lost in a blizzard that followed a mysterious light to safety, or a merchant who bargained with a desert spirit for water. These stories, passed down through generations, add a layer of mysticism to the road, making us wonder if some perils were supernatural or merely the mind's tricks in the face of extremity. The road's challenges shaped its character, turning it from a mere trade route into a symbol of human resilience, where every step forward was a victory over adversity, and every lost soul a reminder of the price paid for connection. As we ponder these perils, we are left with the thrill of the unknown, a sense of wonder at the courage of those who walked the road, and a curiosity about what other secrets lie hidden in its forgotten corners. The dangers and challenges of the Silk Road were the forge that tempered its legacy, a path where every grain of sand held a story, and every stop a secret waiting to be uncovered. The road invites us to explore, to question, and to dream of the wonders that await beyond the next horizon. Modern legacy and rediscovery. The modern legacy of the Silk Road is a vibrant tapestry that weaves together the threads of ancient history with the fabric of contemporary life, where the echoes of camel bells and merchant haggling can still be heard in the bustling markets of Istanbul and Sion, reminding us that this legendary network was not just a path for trade, but a bridge that connected civilizations in ways that continue to shape our world today. As we explore the rediscovery of the Silk Road in the 19th and 20th centuries, we uncover a story of adventure, scholarship, and revelation that has brought to light treasures long buried in the sands of time, but also raised new questions about what secrets remain hidden beneath the surface, waiting for the next generation of explorers to unearth them. The rediscovery of the Silk Road began in earnest during the Age of Exploration, when European powers, driven by a thirst for knowledge and empire, sent intrepid adventurers into the heart of Asia to map its unknown territories and uncover its ancient wonders. In the late 19th century, figures like the Swedish explorer Sven Hedin braved the Taklamakan deserts, scorching sands, and freezing nights to chart the road's forgotten routes, his expeditions revealing lost cities like Lulan, where the mummified remains of ancient travelers still clutch their belongings as if frozen in time, their desiccated faces a haunting reminder of the road's deadly toll. Hayden's tales of sandstorms that buried entire caravans alive and oases that vanished like mirages sparked a wave of interest in Europe. But they also left us wondering what other ghost cities lie beneath the dunes, their walls whispering stories of lost fortunes and forgotten lives that could rewrite our understanding of ancient trade and migration. Following Hayden came the British archaeologist Aurel Stein, whose expeditions in the early 20th century uncovered the caves of the Thousand Buddhas at Dunhuang, a trove of manuscripts and artworks that had been sealed away for over 1,000 years, their vibrant colors preserved in the dry desert air as if painted yesterday. Stein's discovery of the Diamond Sutra, the world's oldest printed book dated to 868 AD, was a revelation that illuminated the road's role in spreading Buddhism and knowledge. But it also raised ethical questions about the removal of artifacts from their homeland, as Stein shipped thousands of items to Britain, leaving behind a legacy of cultural loss that continues to stir debates about repatriation and the true cost of discovery. What other hidden caves might exist along the road, their walls painted with frescoes that depict forgotten rituals or lost technologies, waiting for a modern explorer to stumble upon them in the flickering light of a torch? The Silk Road's modern legacy is not just in museums and textbooks, but in the living cultures that still thrive along its ancient paths, where the bazaars of Samarkand echo with the haggling of merchants, much as they did 1,000 years ago, their stalls piled high with silks and spices that carry the same scents that once enticed traders from distant lands. In Uzbekistan, the Registan's majestic madrasas stand as monuments to the road's golden age, their turquoise tiles gleaming under the sun like jewels scattered from a caravan's load. But recent restorations have uncovered hidden chambers beneath the floors, filled with artifacts that hint at secret societies of scholars who gathered there to debate forbidden knowledge, raising questions about what esoteric wisdom was exchanged in the shadows of these grand halls, and how it might have influenced the Renaissance in Europe through indirect channels that we have yet to fully trace. In China, the Mogao caves at Dunhuang have yielded over 45,000 manuscripts since their rediscovery by Wang Yuanlu in 1900, but ongoing excavations continue to reveal new grottos sealed away for centuries their walls painted with frescoes that depict scenes of daily life along the road, from caravan processions crossing deserts to merchants bargaining in bustling markets. But these images also contain anomalies, like unidentified symbols or figures that don't match known historical records, sparking speculation about lost cultures or even extraterrestrial influences that might have intersected with the road's travelers in ways that challenge our understanding of ancient history. The cave's preservation is a miracle, their dry climate protecting fragile scrolls from decay. But climate change now threatens them with rising humidity and sand erosion, leaving us to wonder what treasures might be lost forever if we don't act soon. The Silk Road's rediscovery in the 20th century was not just about unearthing artifacts, but about reconnecting a fragmented world, as expeditions like those of Sven Hedin and Oral Stein brought back not only treasures, but also knowledge that bridged East and West, inspiring a renewed interest in global history that continues to this day. Hayden's mapping of the Lopnor region in Xinjiang uncovered the ruins of Lulan, a once thriving oasis city that vanished around the 4th century AD. Its mummified inhabitants, preserved in the desert's dry embrace, with tattoos and clothing that suggest connections to Indo European peoples far from home, raising questions about migration patterns and cultural exchanges that predated the road's formal establishment and hint at lost languages or religions that might have flourished in these forgotten hubs. Stein's discovery of the Diamond Sutra in Dunhuang's Cave 17, a library sealed in the 11th century, revealed the world's oldest dated printed book, but it also contained texts in unknown scripts that scholars still struggle to decipher, suggesting hidden knowledge or coded messages that could unlock secrets of alchemy or astronomy from the Tang dynasty. These finds have transformed our understanding of the road, but they also leave us with mysteries, like why was the cave sealed? Was it to protect against invaders or to hide forbidden knowledge from prying eyes? In recent decades, our satellite imagery and ground penetrating radar have revealed lost cities like Subashi in Xinjiang, where Buddhist stupas rise from the sands like ghosts of a bygone era, their walls etched with frescoes that depict scenes of trade and ritual that blend Indian, Chinese, and Persian styles in ways that suggest cultural fusions we have yet to fully comprehend. These discoveries raise questions about how ideas traveled faster than goods, and what lost inventions or philosophies might still lie buried, waiting for the next intrepid archaeologist to unearth them. The modern legacy of the Silk Road is alive in initiatives like China's Belt and Road, which revives the ancient roots with modern infrastructure, but it also sparks controversies about cultural heritage and environmental impact, leaving us to wonder if this resurgence will uncover new mysteries or bury old ones under concrete and steel. Tourism has brought the road's wonders to millions, with sites like the Mogao Caves drawing visitors who marvel at the artistry, but also ponder the hidden caves that may still exist, sealed away like time capsules from a forgotten age. The road's influence on art is profound, with Persian miniatures depicting caravan scenes that blend Islamic calligraphy with Chinese landscapes in ways that hint at lost artistic traditions that could reveal more about daily life along the route, if only we could find more examples hidden in private collections or remote libraries. In music, the lute's journey from Persia to Europe via the road created hybrid instruments that shaped global sounds. But what lost melodies were composed in the caravanserais, their notes carried away on the wind like forgotten whispers. The mysteries of the Silk Road's rediscovery are as compelling as its ancient secrets, with tales of explorers like Aurel Stein braving bandit attacks and sandstorms to uncover manuscripts that had slumbered for centuries. But Stein's removal of artifacts to Britain raises ethical questions about colonial archaeology and the right to cultural heritage that continue to debate today. Hedden's expeditions, where he nearly perished in the Lob Nor Desert, only to discover ancient mummies with Caucasian features that challenge our understanding of migration patterns and suggest lost Indo European tribes in China long before recorded history, leaving us to wonder what other ethnic enigmas lie buried along the road's forgotten branches. These rediscoveries have not only enriched our knowledge, but also sparked new mysteries, like the Tarim mummies with their tartan clothing that resemble Celtic patterns, hinting at cultural connections across continents that defy conventional timelines and make us question how far ancient peoples traveled and what knowledge they shared before the road's formal establishment. The modern quest for the Silk Road's secrets continues with projects like the Digital Silk Road, using AI to analyze satellite images for lost sites, but each new find uncovers more questions, such as the purpose of the giant geoglyphs in Kazakhstan that resemble Nazca lines, but predate them by thousands of years, suggesting a shared human impulse for monumental art that transcends cultures. The Silk Road's legacy is a bridge between past and present, where ancient oases like Turfan yield grapes that taste of history, and modern cities like Almaty echo with the languages of traders long gone. But it also holds dangers for today's explorers, as political tensions in regions like Xinjiang limit access to sites that could hold the key to unsolved puzzles. As we ponder this legacy, we are left with the thrill of what might still be discovered: a lost manuscript in a sealed cave, a buried caravan in the desert sands, or a forgotten city beneath the steppes that could rewrite history as we know it. The modern legacy and rediscovery of the Silk Road is a story of revival and revelation, where the ghosts of ancient traders walk alongside today's scholars, and the road's secrets continue to unfold like a scroll unrolling in the wind, inviting us to dream of the wonders that await those brave enough to follow its path once more. Farewell and good night. Dear listeners, as we bring this series to a close, I want to thank you for joining me on this journey through the secrets of the Silk Road. From the origins of silk to the modern rediscoveries, we have wandered through time and space, uncovering the mysteries that have shaped our world. May these stories linger in your thoughts as you drift into sleep, and may your dreams be filled with the wonders of the ancient world. Good night and sweet dreams.